Hi, Stewart Albertson with Albertson and Davidson, and I want to talk to you briefly about the duties that a trustee owes to trust beneficiaries. Keep in mind that the duties a trustee owes to beneficiaries, it's a one-way street. In other words, the beneficiaries do not owe any duties to the trustee. And this is something that many trustees mistake, and they think that when a beneficiary calls them and asks them for information too much and they get upset about that, the beneficiary is just taking up their time and causing them problems. Well, the beneficiary doesn't have a duty not to call the trustee, whereas the trustee does have a duty to communicate effectively and regularly with trust beneficiaries. But let's look at the basic duties under the probate code that are required of all California trustees. The first is the trustee must administer the trust as written. And what that means is the trustee can't take their own ideas and say, well, mom or dad told me that they wanted this specific gift to go to someone else that's actually written in the trust. The trustee can't do that. The trustee must follow the terms as they are written in the trust. The next is that the trustee has a duty of loyalty to each trust beneficiary. So they can't take a position that one beneficiary is going to be treated better or worse than the other. And that goes next in line with the duty to deal impartially with all trust beneficiaries. The trustee cannot favor one beneficiary over the other. And we see this happen in siblings relationships sometimes. We see a trustee brother who gets along with one sibling better than the other, and so they give all kinds of benefits and favors to the trustee, to the beneficiary they get along with, but they're abusive, they don't return phone calls, they don't deal with the beneficiary that they don't like so well. Another duty is not to deal with the trust property as their own. So if the trustee is an investor and they're an aggressive investor in the real estate market or in the stock market, and they go after very aggressive investments that have the ability to make a lot of money, but they also have the ability to lose a lot of money, they can't bring that same investment style and philosophy to the trust administration. So they can't deal with the trust money and assets like they would their own. There's certain rules and requirements that they have to follow in administrating the trust assets. The next duty that they have is to take control of and preserve trust property. So if they know there's a piece of real property out there and they need to go and take control of it and preserve it, maybe there's a tenant in there that's not paying rent, they need to take control of that property, they need to evict the tenant, and they either need to make that property productive or sell it so that they can take the cash assets and invest them under the Uniform Prudent Investor Act and the Probate Code. That runs right in line with the next duty, and that is to make trust property productive. You can't just take $1 million and put it in a savings account with 0% interest. You have to invest that property and make it productive, but again, it can't be in aggressive speculative investments. The Uniform Prudent Investor Act and the Probate Code outlines exactly how a trustee is required to make trust assets productive. If a trustee fails to follow the Uniform Prudent Investor Act and there's significant losses in the trust, then the beneficiary can surcharge the trustee, which means the trustee has to pay back to the trust all of those losses so the beneficiaries are not harmed. The final duty that I'll talk about, and there's more duties than this, but these are the basic duties, is the duty to enforce claims. And this is where the trustee, for instance, finds out that there's a promissory note written by a sibling, maybe to the parent before the parent died, for $30,000. And maybe the trustee even likes that sibling a lot. But the trustee has to come forward to that sibling and say, hey, there's a promissory note here for $30,000. You have to pay it back to the trust. And that's something that a trustee would be required to do even though they like the beneficiary. These are a very complex set of rules in California for trustees. They apply to every trustee, professional, private. If they're just a family member or friend that's a trustee, they still are required to meet all of these obligations, and it's a one-way street that is owed to each and every beneficiary of every California trust.